clevelandcavaliers.com/Cavs. We got some news since we last recorded. Tristan Thompson is officially back with the Cleveland Cavaliers. We have also filled the last two-way spot with JT Thor, and filling in as co-host, as always, is my co-host Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Well, I made a grievous error and changed up my tech setup 3 minutes before we went live, and we missed most of that intro from you. But I do believe that we should be good now. So apologies to the gang. I got cocky. I'm going headphoneless and was changing all my sources around. And you know they say what comes before the fall, and it's pride, Justin.
Well, keeping your ego in check has been a full-time job on top of my full-time job and then doing this podcast on the side. So this is yet the latest chapter in that. For those that were tuning in on YouTube and may have missed it, did refer to Tristan Thompson signing with the Cleveland Cavaliers, returning in that backup center role. Carter, let's start there before we dive into the main topic today, which is going to be an evaluation of how confident we feel about the Cavs starters, some of the swing factors that'll go into how they perform this season. But obviously, we haven't had a lot of signings this offseason, and Tristan Thompson returning with the Cleveland Cavaliers, while I think there's probably some sense that, as the market dried up, that this was certainly a possibility, it's still kind of nice to see a familiar face when it comes to TT.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a flurry of transactions, really. I mean, the Cavs also locked up JT Thor on a two-way. They finally announced Imani Bates as well on that two-way. So, it was nice to just kind of get everything done so we could, properly evaluate this roster. And it does seem like they're probably done for the offseason, at least in terms of just signing players, you look at some of the reporting and looks like they're likely going to keep an open spot, and I think that makes the most sense. Obviously, I guess done with the exception of Isaac Okoro. Sorry. The Okoro business is going to need to come to a conclusion one way or the other. But yeah, to the Tristan thing, I think something is really important to say, and I'm going to say it over and over and over again, and people who have heard me say it are probably sick of it, but it's really important to note that the Cavs did not sign a backup center. They signed a third string center. Even though the depth chart will likely read Tristan Thompson as the backup, that's not the case. The case is that Evan Mobley is the backup five. And if you were looking for maybe a flashier signing, even in our own Discord, we had some folks kind of say things like, hey, some players I was really excited about also went for, minimum contracts. Why couldn't we be in on that? And something I think is really important to say is a Cavs minimum for a backup five is probably worse than most because of that fact that if the team's healthy, their backup five will not play be in the rotation because you really need to give Evan as many developmental minutes as you can at the backup five. So given that's the case, you're almost certainly going to go with a veteran. They actually doubled down last year. They went with a swing in Damian and then a vet in Tristan. Obviously, they're not taking a swing at that position this year because they drafted Jalen Tyson, who is kind of in that Damian Jones role. So I think ultimately, if you were going to go between taking a swing on someone who has a little bit more upside, a guy like I just forgot his name. He was the Heat center, Yurt7, Omar Yurt7. A guy like that who was like, hey, maybe he's got a little something, but more than likely he doesn't. Or you go with the most known of quantities, which is bringing Tristan back. It's hard for me to find any fault with bringing Tristan back. And by the way, it was quite good for this team last year. Obviously, the suspension stunk. But even when he came back, he was really helpful for them in the playoffs.
Yeah, he was helpful in the playoffs. The one thing I'll say, obviously, I'm happy to have Tristan back. I think if you're framing this as a third string center, I think he makes a lot of sense. I would still love, ideally, my desire to see a 4-5 be on this team, someone that can play both power forward and center. I would still love to see that if a trade was possible, but this goes into the conversations we've had in the past where it's very easy to say archetypes. finding players that actually fit those archetypes that are available. At this time of free agency, they're not available. I don't think even at the start of free agency, there was a player that fit that exact archetype that was available to the Cleveland Cavaliers. But I think I would feel just a little bit better still when we talk about, confidence in the depth. I would like it if Tristan was a true third string center that, hey, the plan A and B is we're starting Jarrett Allen there. Evan Mobley's playing the backup minutes, but we have this other, power forward that can play some center. Like I would feel just a little bit more comfortable there, but I think we're going to see this time and time again when it comes to team building under this new CBA is you're going to have to make some compromises. You're not going to have perfect rosters. I think sometimes as Cavs fans, when we go into, all right, we're going to try to start contending, when we start getting back into that mindset, we go to what feels familiar. And the last time we were trying to contend and win championships, we had basically a perfect basketball team that we had to counter in the Golden State Warriors. Reality is teams aren't built like that. There are going to be flaws across the board. It's what's going to make matchups so much more interesting. I think it's what has led to the parity that we are seeing across the NBA. So I can nitpick it from that extent, but on the other hand, it's just nice to see Tristan Thompson back. I think.
And if you look
he's been training all off season. It's not like, he's been doing NBA TV hits or anything like that. Like we've seen him. We've seen him in the workout videos with Darius, with Donovan. And I think that kind of stuff has made it a little less surprising that he is back with the Cavs.
Yeah, it just made sense. Plus the market was just dry. I didn't really see a lot of names on there that you would go like, oh man, they have to get this guy. And if they go with the known commodity, then I'll hold that against them. Like, yeah, there are guys that I like, that I've liked for a long time. People like Robert Covington, who kind of scratches that 4-5 itch maybe, but like, these are what I would probably call a distressed asset in the end. And like, you're not, there's no guarantee that there's gold at the end of that, a pot of gold at the end of that particular rainbow.
Yeah, and I obviously like JT Thor on a two-way contract. I mentioned on the last podcast, like I would have been comfortable with him on a regular NBA contract. Like I think that is the type of player that I'd be comfortable taking a swing on for the 15th roster spot. If the Cavs are going to keep that 15th spot open for trade flexibility reasons and financial flexibility reasons and evaluate things at the deadline, I'm fine with that, because I do think having JT Thor on a two-way contract, that's someone that you might be able to give spot minutes. We saw that with Craig Porter Jr. last year, where he was able to fill in as a result of injuries, and that's part of the intention of having those two-way deals that don't count against the salary cap. So I do think that's a shrewd bit of flexibility. We talk about Jalen Tyson not having a spot in the rotation when it comes to how we guess that the season's going to play out at the start of the year. We don't see minutes being available to him. They're not going to be available to a 15th man. They're not going to be available to a JT Thor. But if you do need a warm body that can step in, that has played a lot of NBA minutes, having Thor, that's Jalen Tyson's age, on a two-way contract, I do think that is a smart move that has a chance of paying off, which is really what you want with those two-way deals.
Yeah, and I think this is probably the natural transition to the two-way strategy now that it is finalized, now that we know it's Bates, Travers, and Thor. I do want to ask you, does it bother you at all that they went with 3 big wings? Speaking of the archetype store, they certainly went to the same section to get all 3 of their wings. Obviously different flavors of each of those wings, but it's still 3'6'8" to 6'9", rangy 3/4s.
Can I just say I would love to combine them all into one player?
Oh, brother.
Thor's athleticism with Travers' defense and basketball IQ and Bates' shooting. Like, let's do this. No, it doesn't bother me, because I think when it comes to acquiring talent, I think you should just 99% of the time, with the majority of your roster spots, you should be trying to acquire the best talent available to you. And if they believe that this is the best available talent on two-way contracts, then that's, what it is. Realistically, like, it'd be nice to have a big man kind of in the system that maybe you'd be developing. But a lot of times when someone has NBA size at the center position, and they can walk and chew gum and they're coordinated enough to play NBA basketball, those guys are already on NBA contracts. Like, teams are taking swings on them. They are actively kind of in position to potentially play some NBA minutes. They're not ending up in the G League. Like, you watch a lot of G League games, they're typically undersized as a result of that. So I'm, as much as, you know, we'd like to maybe see some size there, it's not something that I really think about, because what do we consistently talk about? That the biggest need for the Cavs is adding, you know, a wing with size, someone that does have that two-way capability. So if you're taking some swings there, like, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, I think from a roster building perspective, I think it's 100% the right choice. I love the idea of saying, like, hey, we need to, you know, like, nothing would meaningfully change the trajectory of this current build more than a wing that hits, you know? And you look at where this team actually did invest, you know, some of their choices. And, you know, it's a draft pick on a wing in Jalen Tyson, and then 3 two-way wings being brought back, only one of which was here last year in the form of Amani. And you go, well, you're going to get as many bites at the apple as possible. So yeah. I think that's really smart.
And these are all guys that they used, or at least in the case of Amani and Travers, these are guys that they use draft picks on as well.
Yes. So I think ultimately that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you want to advocate on behalf of the devil, you know, you might say, hey, you know, when you had Bates, CPJ, and Mobley last year, and then eventually Pete Nance, you at least could conceivably say, well, if we get really banged up at one of the position groups, smalls, wings, and bigs, we have someone there. But I would say that I wouldn't worry too much about that. Reality is CPJ is on the main roster now, so they have that same level of insulation as last year. And they never really played Isaiah, even when they were down, and you know, playing Dean Wade minutes at the 5. So it's like, I don't feel like they are particularly leaving anything on the bone there, but I did think that was at least worth bringing up if you did want a big or a guard with one of those.
One thing
spots
to consider, just as we continue to see, you know, as teams round out their roster, we see training camp invites and all that kind of stuff. It is possible that we see, you know, Isaiah back with the charge, or Pete with the charge, or DJ Burns with the charge, whatever the case may be. And if you run into that type of situation, you can provide those guys with a 10-day contract, right? Like, you can kind of do those call-ups. We saw that in the past with Brandon Goodwin, guys that are, you know, within the system. Like, that is kind of something that could be at your disposal. But in general, why I prefer taking the shot with the wings rather than investing the two-way spot in a big man is, we've seen with first round picks, when it comes to centers, it takes time to learn NBA defense. Throwing out a, you know, two-way center in a kind of break glass in case emergency situation and expecting them to kind of anchor down your entire defense is a tough ask. I would expect them, you know, if they do keep a roster spot available, maybe you sign a veteran in that spot. Maybe you find some other way, like you throw a 10-day contract at, you know, someone that's been around the block a couple of times. Like, there are options available to them, but
I'm
in
totally
general,
with you.
I'm okay with this approach.
And I think the 10-day contract's a good call out. We've seen this team do that a lot to get them through some let's call them lean times in the roster where they're just, you know, they're banged up and you know, down, and a position group is just decimated. You can call up Boban, Marjanovic, or JaVale McGee, who are free agents right now, and be like, hey, you in shape? Want to give us some minutes? So, like, I think that ultimately plays in your favor.
Chapter 3 of Kendrick Perkins. Let's go.
Yeah. So ultimately, I think it's a smart deployment of resources. They need a wing to hit. And you know, a two-way is always going to be a lottery ticket on that front. You know, it's more likely than not that none of the three are, you know, 8-year NBA players. Just looking at the statistics, but like, it's still a worthy investment. And more than that, I just like that they cycled them. You know, they're trying different bodies in. They're bringing in Travers. They're bringing in Thor. They're trying to see who can stick. And that's exactly how I would use that position. Were I running the team.
Yeah, totally agree. But, hopefully these are the type of conversations that we don't need to have in season. I think we've had a few too many of them the last couple of years where we've been trying to figure out, all right, well, what ways can we patch up this canoe and just survive until the starters get back? But the meat and potatoes of this episode, what I really want to focus on is those starters. Taking a look at kind of how they performed the last couple of years, if they've been here. Obviously, Max Strus, I think it's clear that he's going to retain that starting small forward spot. I don't see anyone taking that to start the season. But I want to talk about the starters and just kind of go over what we expect from them next season. This is the time of year where we've done a lot of, podcasting about what we expect to see next year, or like what our predictions are and that sort of thing. I want to dive into each of that to just kind of like highlight what thinking we have that goes into those expectations, and then just being honest with the audience about what's our confidence level with each of these things. I make predictions that I'm like 10 out of 10 confident about, and there's other ones where I can see it going both ways, and I'm going to come out on the side of optimism. So Carter, how do you want to start this off? Do you want to do it in kind of position groups where we talk guards and bigs, or do you want to talk each one individually?
I think we should do each one individually, Justin. It's a long off season.
All right, let's do it. Let's start with the head of the snake, Donovan Mitchell, who was clearly the Cavs' best player last year. One of the questions we didn't get to last week was, how has your opinion of Donovan Mitchell kind of changed over the last 2 years of him being on the roster, kind of looking back after the signing? And, I was not the biggest Mitchell fan prior to him coming into Cleveland. He has changed a lot of my perceptions about who he is as a player, the growth that he has shown over the last 2 years in Cleveland, and also just made me like reevaluate things as a fan. Like, because I think it is just a natural reflex that you, as a fan, you're always going to be more defensive of the players that have been drafted by the team. When someone gets traded in or signed as a free agent, there's not that same level of emotional connection, and it takes some time to build that up. But I gotta say, looking at everything that he's done on and off the court for the last couple of years with the Cavs, he is someone that I am very invested in. And, diving into the numbers and just seeing how much better he has got consistently throughout his time in Cleveland makes it hard not to feel excited and confident about what he's going to bring next season.
Yeah, I mean, and getting into the kind of the actual meat and potatoes of it, he had obviously an unbelievable debut season. Averaged 28 points a game, shoots 38% or 39% from three. Really, really an unbelievable year as a scorer. And then last year, a lot of the scoring metrics dipped just a little bit here and there, but the playmaking was better than it's ever been. So. In terms of what to expect, I think what I am actually, I think, if I'm given truth serum, I think I might expect his first, not coast year, but his first year that's maybe a little bit more conservative. He puts a lot of torque on his body, playing the way he plays. He is a 100% kind of effort player, and I wonder if, as he's going into his age 28 year, especially with a new offense coming in, and ideally Darius getting back on the ball a little bit more, I wonder if this is a year where maybe the numbers plateau a little bit, and he's picking his spots a little bit more as he's getting older. What do you think of that concept?
I can definitely see that, and I think some of that is tied into why he was so efficient in 22-23, where, there was a little bit less from a playmaking perspective on his shoulders. I do want to highlight, in 22-23, he generated just over 11 points per game off of assists. So in addition to his scoring, he was accounting for 11 points per game off of assists. Last year, that went up all the way to 16. And I think the most impressive part of that was it wasn't just a volume thing. His assist to turnover ratio improved from 1.7% to 2.2, or 2.2 assists per turnover. That's a really, really encouraging sign. There was real growth in his vision as a playmaker, as the decision making, understanding that as a lead guard in the times that he had to be a lead guard, you have to be a little more careful with how you use possessions. You don't want, those live ball turnovers, whether it's as a scorer or as a playmaker. And I think the other thing that stands out is even though his, 3-point percentage dropped by 2%, he actually was better on catch and shoot looks. He shot 42% on catch and shoots, where the year prior
I feel
it was
like I don't even remember a single catch and shoot from last season.
Yeah, whereas the year before it was 37.6. So where you really saw that drop off was he was a full 4% worse on pull-ups, and that makes sense. Like
he was
shot
unbelievable on pull-ups 2 years ago.
Yeah, he shot 39%, over 39% 2 years ago on those pull-up shots, which honestly is probably just not sustainable, period. And that went down to 36.8%. I think some of that also had to do with the amount of lower body stuff that he was playing through, right? Like he had the hamstring to start the year, and then obviously the knee that kept him out for a lot of the second half of the season. But I do agree with you. I think my expectation for this offense is that, Kenny's not going to make Donovan and Darius work as hard as they had to work to score and play make. I think you're going to see a lot easier sets for them. And, when we're talking about how confident we are in Donovan Mitchell heading into next year, if I had to rank it 1 out of 10 or 1 to 10, I'm going all the way to 9. I'm very confident that Donovan is going to be.
I want to challenge a little bit. And I think our confidence rating should be on how confident we are in our take.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm confident that I'd still put it at a 9. I think his efficiency is going to be there. I think he's going to continue to build off the success he had last season. His defensive EPM improved from the 65th percentile in his first year with Cleveland, which was really good by his standards, all the way up to the 89th. So he really improved on the defensive end in addition to the playmaking. I think reducing the load on him is going to help those efficiency numbers come back. And the only reason I don't go all the way to 10 out of 10 when it comes to Donovan Mitchell next season is because the last few years, he's always dealing with some nagging injury come playoffs. He had the fractured middle finger on his left hand heading into the Knicks series. Obviously, last year was the knee. He had a lot of issues with Utah. The only time he really didn't was when they had that break heading into the bubble. And it's not like the minutes per game are out of this world, but he just plays so hard all the time when he's out there. And I think that's why I'm hoping that the burden is going to be lessened on him. That's also why I look at people side-eyed like they're crazy when they're trying to advocate for Donovan Mitchell having an even more increased load. And we got to take away anyone that can do playmaking and have him play martyr ball. I don't think that's the path. And I don't think Mitchell thinks that's the path to him having his best version of himself and being himself come playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of my prediction of him taking it easy, I think or not taking it easy, but again, maybe pacing himself, trying to not cut the minutes down as much as the torque he's putting on his body in those minutes. That's really just a vibes thing. So I'm not terribly confident in that prediction, but I am terribly confident that this guy's pretty much among the most reliable players in the league right now.
Agreed.
I don't know if he's a top 5 player, but I think he's probably a top 5 reliability player. In terms of, he pretty much gives you what he's going to give you on a night-to-night basis. I think that's why the last month of the regular season last year was so jarring, because it was he can't get to 20 points right now. He is not right, and it was really jarring. So it'll be I hope to see that consistency maintain, even if it's at the expense of a slightly lower ceiling during the regular season.
Yeah, and I will say part of why, my confidence and belief in Donovan has increased is seeing how he adjusted to being physically limited in the playoffs, right? I didn't think he had that change of pace in him, right? Not that he wasn't playing as hard. He's going to play at 110% every time he's out there on the court, but just his ability to compensate for the lack of explosiveness. And
it was a nice look into late career Donovan almost.
Right. And not many players can make that kind of an adjustment. So I was really impressed by that. But I do think, if Evan Mobley takes a step forward that we're hoping for, if Darius gets back to the level that we expect, and if, Kenny's offense is a little more free flowing and getting guys into the best positions, he's not going to have to work as hard to be as productive as he's been in the past. And I think that's what we want to see. We want to see that in the regular season. We want to see him doing his best work in the playoffs, just like I want to see you guys doing your best work. And you know that only you can do your best work. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no extra cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion. Carter, do you want to go to the guy that's probably most responsible for alleviating some load for Donovan in Darius Garland?
Yeah.
You've made me talk first on Darius the last few times, and I just did an ad read, so I'm going to make you go.
Yeah, I think in terms of my kind of expectations for Darius, it is a proper bounce back season. I think we were hoping to see a leap last year. And instead we got a regression for all the reasons we've talked about ad nauseum, plenty of context around it. But the long and short of it is, I thought he was worse last year than he was 2 years ago.
Yes.
And
you don't have to say think. He was worse.
Yeah, he was worse by just about every, available metric. He was worse. And, I think it manifested in a lot of ways that, in terms of the trust, the offense that that was put in him to run the offense. That's part of the reason I think we saw Donovan run more. But I think ultimately there was a lot of noise, and I understand why a lot of noise was that Donovan just needs to take over and run things last year. And some people have taken that, extrapolated out into the future of the team, that Donovan almost needs to be running point, and Darius has to just get better and better off ball. And I would say there's no point then. There's no point to this experiment, and you should move. You should move on, because if Darius is not your point guard, if he is not playing at least as well as he was 2 years ago, then this, then I don't really. I think my faith in this roster construction goes way down. Luckily, we have Darius, who has an offseason to get healthy. We have Darius with a coach who is a huge fan, a coach who has gotten a lot out of multiple ball handler-led offenses. And so ultimately, I think that this is a great spot for Darius to bounce back, and that is what I expect from him.
Yeah, and I'm going to say a lot of the same stuff when it comes to Mobley, but when it comes to Darius, what we need from him isn't something we haven't seen before. And I think that that's really important to remember. I think it's important to remember that Darius was the best player on a team that at the All-Star break was the third best team in the Eastern Conference, right? He led them to 44 wins even with all those injuries after the All-Star break. Like, that isn't something that should just kind of be brushed aside. And, going even further, 22-23, he was a fantastic player. Like, it was unfortunate last year because his catch and shoot 3-point percentage was at 34.4%. The year prior was 44%. He shot 44% on catch and shoot threes. That is an ideal partner to have next to Donovan Mitchell. The only 3-point kind of rate that, was steady last year was the pull-up shots. He shot 39.8% on pull-up threes. And I don't think that it was only 0.7% better than the year before, but I think that was Darius being more selective. I don't think he had a lot of confidence in terms of when he was pulling. I don't think he was pulling from as deep as he had the year before. The assertiveness on the 3-point shot just wasn't there, and you could tell that his confidence overall wasn't there. He still shot 37.1%, and I think that's kind of like an important thing to remember is like, I think some people have said, oh, this is his worst year since his rookie year and whatnot. It wasn't. Like, it was better than his second year. And like, if this is the floor, we're still talking about someone that was putting up 18 and 7 on like 45-37 shooting. Like, that's not horrible, but we have much, much higher expectations for Darius. And he's going to need to be much better than he was in 22-23 in order for the Cavs to reach kind of the levels that we hope. And I think looking at where he really needs to improve, we got to see that assist to turnover ratio go back. Last year it was 2.1, so just under Donovan's. The year prior was 2.7, and that was phenomenal. Among high usage players, he was second only to Jokic. Defensive EPM, he dropped from the 79th percentile in 22-23 to the 51st percentile. We need to see that get right back up. You know, he was still slightly above average, but he needs to get to that level that we had seen a year prior. And the only area where I would like to see him improve that we just haven't seen much of it, like we saw for a couple months, is his finishing at the rim. It was actually pretty much the same as it was the year prior at 55.1% compared to 55.3%. But I would like to see that tick up just a little bit more. And, you know, the only real sample size we have of him finishing well at the rim is those first couple months of last season. I think that it's possible. I think he can do a better job drawing free throws. I know that has been a point of emphasis for him in kind of off-season workout videos and whatnot. I would like to see that tick up a little bit, but outside of that, I think we've seen a track record of him being able to play on and off ball, making Donovan better, him being better next to Donovan, and making the team better as a whole.
Yeah, I think again we can point out all the things that didn't go right. And there were plenty. And I think, but I think we're both, we've been on different levels with Darius, and I'll bet when we give our confidence ratings here, yours will probably be a little higher than mine, just a guess. Mm-hmm. But I think one thing we've always agreed on is like Darius is the floor raiser and the ceiling raiser for this offense. He is the one who, we are most probably invested in offensively for this team, because when he's really orchestrating, then everything gets better. One thing I did want to note on the turnover percentage, just another little indicator of how wonky his season was. I think I saw some stat, and I'm going to miscite it probably a little bit, but I think it was like turnover percentage on isolation plays. He was like second or third worst in the league. And that just goes to show like, and those are the turnovers that like feel the worst, you know? So I think a lot of that stuff's going to go away. I don't ever think he'll be a great isolation player, nor a great finisher. But I think a lot of those things, he can juice those numbers by leaning more into the things he should be elite at, you know? We always talk about how Steph, I remember the great internet debates of Steph versus Kyrie as a finisher, because internet nerds were looking at Steph's percentage at the rim going, oh, look, it's way better than Kyrie's. And it's like, well, it's way better because people are so petrified of him 30 feet from the hoop. He gets nothing but wide open layups. Like, I think that's Darius's. Cuts, yeah, I think that's Darius's road to improving as a finisher is, getting back to being a guy who strikes fear into the heart of defenses at the 3-point line, and as a playmaker where they're not guarding his layup as well. They're not chest to chest with a guy that they're bigger and stronger than. So I certainly expect Darius to bounce back. Do I expect him to take the leap that we were hoping for last year? I'd maybe not at this point. I'd just like to kind of see, crawl, walk, run here a little bit. But yeah, how confident are you in our kind of shared opinion that a bounce back is coming?
That a bounce back is coming, I feel very confident. I'd probably
a bounce
put that
back to 2 years ago, Darius.
Yeah, I think if that's the standard, I would put it like a 9. I'd say for him to make the leap that I was expecting last season, I'd put that down at a 7. Like, because I think he does need to be better than he was in 22-23 in order for the Cavs to be a true contender. And I think that means him upping that 3-point volume and being more consistently assertive in that spot. I think that's more important than, kind of nitpicking rim percentage. Because you look at like rim percentage for other small guards, like Jalen Brunson's at 55.7%, right? Like it's a half percentage more. Dame is a percentage higher. Trey finishes worse at the rim than Darius, right? Like that's not uncommon with these kind of 6'6" guards. But he needs to up the 3-point volume to a level that we haven't seen before. And whether or not he is able to kind of consistently assert his will upon the game and be as aggressive as he needs to be. I'd put that at a 7. I think it's in there. I think he is capable of doing that. But so that's what I care about more than just getting back to 22, 23, because maybe this is wrong, but I'm just taking like that return to form for granted to some extent. Like, I just think it's going to happen because I think that's who he is when he's healthy. But I think that there's another level that he needs to get to, and that there is another level kind of within him to get there.
I think I'm going to go down to a 7, not on getting back to 2 years ago form, only because I do believe that is the kind of player he is. But there is baggage now. There is pressure. There is, we can't just pretend like last year didn't happen,
Yeah, I agree.
And we saw a guy who, when he got banged up, it really, really, really affected his play. And, he's a small guy. Getting banged up is probably something of an occupational hazard. And I think ultimately, like, with all the weight of everything, like, I think, it's weird, because obviously, in the national media, there is some talks about, potential trades or whatever. And I almost feel like if Darius was somewhere else, the chances of him bouncing back to 2 years ago go up. But like, just there's always that little bit of like, here we go again baggage after a bad year in the same place with the same teammates. And I just think that's why I mean, still a 7 out of 10, still pretty damn confident this is going to happen. Yeah. But
you're probably dragging me down to an 8 and then a 7 for a lead.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to bum you out. But yeah, that's the only reason why I think I would temper that a little bit, because I do really believe in his ability still. But like, after a rough year, you do have to go prove it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that is all fair, and the baggage definitely gives me some concern. You
just don't want people to start bailing on the plan after like a bad week or something.
Right, and when it comes to both Darius and Mobley, really, it's about maintaining confidence, making them go from that level where they can play like an all-star or all-NBA guy for a week or two to someone that is consistently performing at that level. And that is one of the toughest leaps to make, right? Like, going from not really understanding the game and not processing the speed of NBA basketball as a rookie and sophomore to, becoming an all-star and realizing your talent and being able to apply that to an NBA game. Like, that's tough. But that does come naturally as you get stronger and as you understand the game more for players of that caliber. Going from fringe all-star talent to a consistent all-star or all-NBA type talent, that's a lot harder. And I don't think that is something we should just assume occurs as a result of time. But, when it comes to Darius, one thing I feel somewhat confident about is that if he can stay healthy and if he is back to the player that he's been in the past, it's going to have a big impact on this next guy we talk about in Max Strus. Because even last year with Darius in a reduced state, with Darius Garland, Max Strus averaged 12.4 points per game. He shot 45% from the field, and he shot 39% from three. Without Darius, he shot 37% from the floor and 29% from three. And I don't think that is all to do with Darius being like some next level playmaker. I think he's a fantastic playmaker, but I think that had a lot to do with how much Max was asked to do in those games that Darius is out, how much point guard he was forced to play, the difficulty of shots that he had to take during that time. And I think when you're working that hard and you're playing that far outside of your role, it's going to have an impact on your ability to do your normal stuff like catch and shoot threes.
Yeah, I think I think one, you're spot on. Darius was kind of the number one indicator for Max. I think in terms of what I'm expecting for Max, I think what I'm expecting is actually just less Max. I mean, he was playing. There were a lot of nights where he was playing 37, 38 minutes. He ended up being at 32 minutes a game, highest in his career by about 4 minutes. But prior to the year prior in Miami where he played 28. He had never played more than 23 minutes a game, and now he's all the way up to 32. Like, it's a huge minutes load they put on him last year because of the fact that he was one of the most reliable professionals out there. His shooting was obviously very, very important for them. And they needed him to like be a playmaker, a supplementary playmaker a lot. I think this team is a little bit better suited to play a little differently on the wing, especially if healthy. And I even though he was great, I still think the best version of Max is a guy who, is averaging 26 minutes a game that you flex up to 32 to 34 on a night where he's really, really hot, as opposed to, he was just so important for this team. I think if I'm Kenny Atkinson, who, again, as we've noted, has liked to play deeper rotations in the past, Max feels like one of the prime candidates to be a guy who gets to do more with less minutes, which I thought he burned himself out at points last year. So my expectation is to see him less on the floor, but to do even better in those minutes.
So you'd like to see median Strus instead of max Strus, is that correct?
Oh my gosh, I'm hanging up.
I agree with you, man. Like I think when it comes to Max, like he still was taking the majority of his shots as catch and shoot threes. Like when you look at the 3-point attempts, 6 out of his 6.8 3-point attempts were of the catch and shoot variety, and he did shoot a half percentage better than he did the year prior in Miami on those catch and shoot looks, and he shot slightly better than he did in Miami as well. But I do think when you look at those games that they were playing without a point guard, a lot of those shots, there's catch and shoot where a guy is kicking out from the paint and you have your shoulders squared and you line up the shot, and there's the ball swinging around the perimeter because no one can generate penetration, and he takes tough shots. We talked about his openness rating in Miami, how he was in the 5th percentile in terms of how open his threes were. Last year in Cleveland, it went down to the 4th percentile. Like he did not get those easier shots, and some of that is going to be his shot diet. He takes and makes some of the hardest shots that I have seen, and I think that is something of value. But I do think if you can kind of supplement those really tough shots that he takes with some easier looks along the way, you're not going to see the same kind of peaks and valleys that we saw with his 3-point shooting last season. And I think you're correct in that if you just have to play him 28 minutes per game on a steady basis, and then, some nights he gets more, some nights he gets less, rather than the 38 he had to play when guys were injured, I think that keeps him healthier, that keeps him fresher. And I think you're not going to see as volatile of a season in terms of his outputs, because everything else he did was fantastic. Like the little things were all there. He had his best playmaking season. He was in the 4th percentile, Carter, his last year in Miami in terms of defensive EPM. It was in the 93rd percentile with Cleveland. Like it was a 9 and 8
nice
difference.
To play next to Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen.
It certainly does help. He was in a much better context, not playing so much power forward. But he was always someone that competed well on defensively. And I thought now that he was playing within a proper structure on the defensive end, it made that impact that much more evident.
I did. You talking about the challenging threes that he takes did actually kind of make me think of some of our conversations last year after he signed, which was that we kept pointing to the fact that he took unbelievably hard threes in Miami, and the Cavs generate unbelievably open threes. And one thing I did kind of warn against is like maybe part of the reason we take open threes is because the guys who take them are guys people are more okay shooting them, and maybe Strus's threes won't be as open as we think they're going to be. I do think that bore some fruit. He still took super hard threes, which definitely dragged the percentages down. But ultimately, I still think it was very worthwhile. In terms of confidence of how that's going to play out, I'm going to go to a 5. I hope it's more wishful thinking, because I just think he's the kind of guy that coaches like to play. I think that I'm going to wait to see this team be healthy. I'm going to wait to see this team play 10 guys all year before I'm super confident that that's going to come to pass. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go with 5 out of 10 on confidence.
You stole one of the points I was going to make, because I think Max Strus is the exact type of guy that coaches really trust. And when things get tough and when you're in tough games, you are going to play a lot of Max Strus. In terms of a reduced role, I would agree with you. I would go down to 5. In terms of the 3-point shooting bouncing back, like I think he's going to be at that 37, 38%. on the same kind of volume. If he's taking 7 threes a game at 37-38%, I am more than happy with that. And I will, you were correct. You were correct in wondering, like, hey, is the openness rating so good because we have guys that people feel comfortable leaving open? But I will still take my victory lap over Strus shooting basically 39% on threes when Darius was playing. I was still correct that was going to bounce up. It just got a little weirder than I was expecting.
They just didn't play as many minutes as we thought they would.
Yeah, unfortunately not. One guy that did, I'd say exceeded our expectations last year was Jarrett Allen. I thought that he had the best season of his career. Kind of across the board, the defensive rebounding, he went from the 90th percentile up to the 94th percentile. Offensive rebounding, he stayed strong there. Obviously, held it down when Evan Mobley was out, and really performed well prior to that broken rib against Orlando. Like he was their most consistent player through those first 4 games, and was obviously doing it through some pain that we weren't aware of at the time. So Jarrett, I thought, was phenomenal. He's a weird guy to talk about, and I think this comes down to just how we suck sometimes at talking about centers. But I don't see any kind of real swing things. Like, I think if he is the player that he was last season, and Garland and Mobley take the steps forward that we expect, and Strus improves in a better context, like, Jarrett Allen just needs to be the guy that he was, and that is more than fine for me. Do you agree with that, or is there something that you've kind of identified that you'd like to see that wasn't there last year?
I think what I expect is for him to be as involved in the offense as he was during that stretch when Evan wasn't playing. I think I want to see him get as many elbow touches as he was getting, especially when he's the only big on the floor. I want to see him operating in the short roll. I want to continue to see that growth because, he improved his assist per game by an entire assist year over year. I thought his decision making was unbelievable last year. I thought his finishing was unbelievable last year. Though a slight dip, in fairness, as he took some more and more challenging shots, and I just thought the offense in general was just kind of gunky last year. So hoping to see a little bit of a bounce back on that 2-point field goal percentage going up and up and up. A paltry 64% last year from our boy. Overall, I just think it's important to say Jarrett is going into his age 26 season. He is entering his physical prime. And thus, I think what I will say is I will expect another best year of his career.
Mm-hmm. The one
it
thing
might
that
be
I
3% better than the prior best year of his career, but I do expect it to be better.
The thing that makes me nervous when it comes to Allen is going back to what you said at the start, which is you want to see him remain as aggressive and as involved as he was in that time when Mobley was out. And it's the thing that makes me nervous about kind of all these predictions, which is really the biggest question when it comes to this Cavs season is, can everybody play at their best when everybody is in the lineup? And, if we're getting Evan Mobley more involved at the nail and kind of that free throw line extended and running offense through there, like, when I look at the numbers, Jarrett Allen shot 49% on mid-range shots last year. Mobley shot 40%, right? Like, some of those spots, Jarrett's more comfortable and he's been more effective operating. And I just want, obviously you're going to be able to use them both in that way as you stagger. You're going to have some lineup flexibility there. But whether Kenny can find that balance to keep everybody aggressive and keep everybody productive and, make all of our predictions true, because, we can talk about how we want all 5 of these guys to be better, but reality might be if we're correct on 3 of them, that might take something away from other guys. That's one of the toughest balances to strike in basketball. And, that is more of that to me, when we're talking about how is Jarrett going to perform next year, how confident do we feel? That's the part that I'm less sure of is, can we keep him as aggressive if we're expecting a larger rollout of Mobley and we're expecting a larger rollout of Darius?
I would say that Jarrett is one of the most complimentary dudes in the entire NBA. he doesn't require a lot of plays to be run for him to make that kind of impact. And I think what's really important to note is that the guy who's coaching the team is maybe the coach who believes in Jarrett Allen more than any other coach Jarrett Allen has ever had. I don't want to misquote, so please don't hold me terribly accountable if I'm misremembering. But I remember Kenny saying something like, "Jarrett, your number is going to be in the rafters someday."
Yeah,
at the Barclays
he did
Center.
in Brooklyn. Yeah,
Like you don't just say that stuff lightly. And Kenny doesn't seem like a guy who's terribly prone to hyperbole. So I think there's a guy who really believes in Jarrett. And you don't like. I feel like if you're a coach, you don't tell rim running pick and roll big that he's going to be his jersey's going to be retired. Typically, you reserve that for people who you believe in just a little bit more than a very basic, simple role. So I think that what those concerns are valid. I think they're fair. But what I would say is that what I want Kenny to do with this offense, I want this offense to become, is an offense that has more diversity of play starters and play finishers. So Darius might be starting plays more often, but that doesn't take away Jarrett's ability to finish them. Donovan might be finishing plays more often, but doesn't stop Jarrett from starting them. I just think there's so much usage to go around, especially if they play fast.
And there's so much playmaking within the lineup too. Like when you think of the big to big passing, like typically like when one of those bigs is being more aggressive, it opens up opportunities for others. Like, I've cited a million times those last 41 games of 22-23 where, Mobley was getting 18, Jarrett was getting 15, and Donovan and Darius were averaging a combined 50 together. Like we saw it work at that level. It's just going to be, baggage isn't the right word, but just going through the experiences of last year, trying to implement something new, trying to implement a new offense, trying to get Mobley more involved. Like I think that status quo and that hierarchy worked when Mobley was at the point that he was at, and Darius and Donovan were at the points that they were at. But we're trying to get to a different place. And I'm just going to be interested to see if that is as smooth as we hope it to be. I just think that it's something that we don't talk about enough. And it's just one of those things that if it doesn't work, that might be one of the reasons why.
I'm not sure I've gotten a number
just curious
from you,
to see
brother.
how it goes. What's that?
I'm not sure I've gotten a number from you yet on Mr. Allen.
When it comes to Jarrett, I'll go 8.
8, that it's mostly a run it back year?
Yeah. I think he's going to be awesome. I think he's going to be kind of fringe all-star level of impact. Won't get an all-star because other guys are going to get more credit. But I think he is one of the best defensive centers in the game. I think his offensive touch is vastly underrated. I think his versatility on the offensive end is underrated. And maybe that's going to be highlighted a little bit more under Kenny. But yeah, I'm going 8, and that 8 is a strong confidence that he's going to do what he's going to do. And the 2% that's missing there is just, what I expressed already, which is just trying to keep everybody involved when there are a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 5 for mine on another best year of his career type of prediction. I think, it's not unreasonable to think that he might take a 10% step back or plateau a little bit.
That's fair. I just feel like, him the year before and who he was last year, like for the most part, he was mostly the same player. Like those rebounding numbers slightly improved, but
he just got better, dude, at everything.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you probably say about his front court mate, despite a lot of noise that there was plateauing there or that there hasn't been a leap. And that's Evan Mobley. What are you expecting out of him?
I definitely expect him to take a step forward. I think sometimes it's going to look ugly. Like I think if, there's ball handling and playmaking reps, I think there's going to be mistakes and highlights that people are going to cherry pick when it comes to that. But the thing we've consistently seen with Evan Mobley is he gets better and better. Like when he makes mistakes, he's going to keep trying to do those things, and he's just going to continue to see the game quicker. He's going to adjust his style of play. I thought, the fact that he went through that knee cleanup and then came back as a better 3-point shooter, like that was exciting to me. Like, he was taking more threes. He made them at a great clip after he came back. We just need to see him up that volume. But like, that just goes to show how hard this guy works. And you see the offseason videos, it looks like there's a physical transformation for him as well. I expect him to take the step forward, but I don't think it's going to be, like 2009 LeBron, where all of a sudden just boom, everything's clicked. Everything that you saw before that was awesome, it has been turned up to 11, and now he is one of the most impactful players of the game. I think there's going to be times that it doesn't look as smooth, but I really do expect him to be put into a better situation than he was last year, a better basketball context, with a better basketball skill set than he had last year. I think that is a formula for a lot of success and another step forward, and potentially a leap. I do think that there is a possibility that he makes a significant leap this season when we look at the player that he is at the end of the year.
I think he is going to be a pure iterative growth player through his career. I think I'm actually just there now, where I think that I'm not really going to be I'm not going to be someone who's looking for a leap. I'm not precluding that it could happen, but I just think on the likely range of outcomes, just knowing the kind of game he has, knowing the stuff he kind of has preternatural feel on versus things that are maybe a little bit more mechanical for him, I just think he's going to be a guy who gets 5 to 8% better every year. And that's what I expect. I expect the 3-point shot to be a little bit better, maybe a little bit higher volume. I expect the mid-range jumper to be a little bit to have a little bit more touch. I expect the floaters to be a little bit better. I expect the handle to be a little bit better. Do I expect anything that is a C+ skill to go to an A+ skill? Not really.
No.
Because I just don't think this team really, like, one, I just don't think that's his archetype of player. And two, I just don't think this team really can afford that. I think this team, like,
elaborate on that.
In order to do that kind of stuff, in order to take those kind of leaps, you need so many reps. You need so much on ball, like in live game action reps. And like, this team is trying to make the Eastern Conference Finals. Scotty Barnes can try stuff in Toronto right now. I just don't think this team has the luxury of letting Evan try stuff to take 2 steps back to take 6 steps forward. And I'm fine with that, because I think it's also a luxury to have your 3rd overall pick just get 5 to 8% better every year and be on the timeline of the rest of your team.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think it's that black and white. Like, I do think, you need those developmental reps, and sometimes that is going to make you worse on certain possessions. But I do think with anything they try to add to Mobley's game, there is an upside to it, right? Like, there is, hey, when this is working and he is making the right decisions in those spots, it's going to make life so much easier for everybody else on the offensive end, and it's going to give the guards this outlet that they really needed in the front court. So, I do think that is going to be one of the most interesting balancing acts, because I don't think it's going to be a free explore the space type season for him. You're right. They can't afford to do that. But I do think that those reps are going to be in there. And how frequently they are letting him explore the space, how well he does at the start of the year with those reps is going to be interesting. How well he does in January with those reps is going to be interesting. And obviously the most important thing is that when we get to mid-April, that it's at another level, and he has continued to take that step forward. And I think the thing we've seen with him, throughout his tenure with the Cavs, is the player he is at the start of the year is not as good as the player he is by the end. Even in last year, that had that weird kind of break in the middle when it came to the surgery and whatnot. He still ended the year as a better player than he was at the start of the year, a more effective player than he was at the start of the year. Go back and watch those games when it was just Donovan and Mobley, and then go watch those Darius and Mobley against Boston in the playoff games. He is a much more confident and much more assertive player. So how confident I am in, like, my prediction that he's going to do what he's done the last couple of years, I'm relatively confident. I would put it overall at like a 7, just because I do think that there are going to be highs and lows kind of with it. But it's me. I'm not going to go below a 7 with any of these starters because it's September and I'm an optimistic dude.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm scoring against my take, not against my belief in the guy. I'm gonna go like a 9. I actually really do believe that. I'm pretty confident that Evan is going to be an iterative player, and not a leaps and bounds type of player. And I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I think the organization should be perfectly comfortable with that. Yeah, so I'm giving it a 9.
Well, I am perfectly comfortable with this episode, dude. I'm excited to see what these guys are going to do. I'm incredibly excited for games to get here so we can stop talking in hypotheticals and see what's actually out in front of us. But big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. We really do appreciate you guys. Make sure you're liking and subscribing. Click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chasedown's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you just support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.